Alright. New people. Hey everybody, it is 2 o'clock sharp. I've been staring at the clock. Welcome to Maddie's Fun Community Conversations. My name is Christina Lee, the founder and principal at Stella Pharma Strategies, and I have the honor of co-hosting with Shanae. Shanae, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Shanya Johnson, and I am the Director of Virtual Behavior Programming over at Humane Rescue Alliance.
Awesome. We're happy to be here. Super excited about today's topic. And we encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat. Tell us where you're from. Hi, Allison. And tell us how you're involved in the animal well-being space. Today's topic is very relevant to all of our work and really important to our work. And when we first kicked off this cohort of the Maddie's Fun Community Conversation Steering Committee, we asked all of you what topics will be helpful. And this was a resoundingly popular topic, grants and funding. But today's topic will be on grants. But before I get too into it, I'll pass it on to Shanae, who will share our question of the day.
Yes, so our question of the day is, what are the main sources of funding for your organization? So how does your organization receive their funding? If you want to go ahead and pop those answers into the chat, we'd love to hear more about that, and we may be able to take one or two responses if anyone wants to unmute themselves. In the chat, we have grants and donors, private donors. Ooh, donations through Facebook. That's interesting. Grants and fundraising events. Wow.
Mm.
I love the thrift and gift shops. That's a pretty interesting and innovative way. Definitely keep these answers coming through the chat. I want to get us through this presentation as quickly as possible. So keep posting those answers for what are the main sources of funding for your organization, and we will jump into announcing some grant winners that we have today. So Christina, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you. Before I pass it on to Irene, I just want to let you guys know that next week, Monday, is Veterans Day, so we will not be having a call to honor those who have served for our country. So just keep that in mind. You will also get a reminder in your emails. So Irene, if you don't mind sharing our grant winners.
Yes, hi, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Irene Chanswong, a senior grant specialist at Maddie's Fund. Happy November, and what a great day to be announcing grants. So let's get right to it. I'll share my screen. Can everybody see? Okay, so as a reminder, folks, you can enter to win every time you watch a community conversation live or on demand. So our October prize winner for Community Conversations is one winner of $5,000, T. Fisher of Align Care Health, Inc. Congratulations, T. I know you're here, and we'll have folks join or chime in after announcements. For the Maddie's Pet Forum monthly giveaway of $3,000, we have Matt Montez of Rancho Coastal Humane Society. And for Maddie's Fund's 30th anniversary 1000 Cuddly Prize Package giveaway, which is in celebration of Maddie's Fund's 30th anniversary. We've teamed up with Cuddly to bring you this $1,000 in prizes each month, awarded to a participant who engages with our special anniversary posts on Maddie's Pet Forum. So our October giveaway winner is Yaned Rodriguez of Wenatchee Valley Humane Society. Congratulations, Ned, and a huge thank you to everyone who shared your stories in October about the people who inspire you. Your reflections truly brought our community closer. So this giveaway will continue on Maddie's Pet Forum each month for the next year, alongside our $3,000 monthly grant giveaway. We hope to hear from you in November. We'll share the link in the chat so you can learn more. And a big thank you to Cuddly for helping us celebrate our 30th anniversary with all of you. Thank you to all our winners and our participants. And do we have some folks who are on the call who were announced today?
T. Fisher here with the lawn care program here at the University of Tennessee. I want to say great thank you so much to Maddie's Fund. We are greatly appreciative and many families will benefit. So thank you so much.
Thanks, T. All right. Back to you, Shania and Christina.
Thank you so much, Irene. All right, now it's time for national updates. So if anyone has national updates they want to share with the group, you can put it in the chat. You can also unmute yourselves. If you do unmute yourselves, please keep your update to under 1 minute so that we can keep a lot of time for today's presentation. Kim, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you. Hi, I'm Kim Domorowski from Maddie's Fund, and I wanted to remind everyone that we are holding Camp Maddie Pet Inclusive Housing next Wednesday, November 13th, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific. We are partnering with Michelson Found Animals to put this on. It's our third edition of Camp Maddie. And if you're passionate about keeping pets and people together, this one is for you. Make sure to register because even if you can't make it Wednesday, we'll record it and you can view the recordings. But we've got 4 incredible speakers from Michelson Found Animals, My Dog is My Home, Heart LA, and My Pitbull is Family. And if you've ever seen anyone speak from any of those organizations, you know that it's going to be a really incredible half day. Our topics include understanding human homelessness response systems for better animal welfare advocacy and program design, dog inclusive housing, legal protections for tenants with pets and the eviction process, and then engaging rental housing providers with pet inclusive approaches and pet owners with information they need to access pet inclusive rental housing. So big topics, really important, and going to be a really great day. So Allison, I think, is going to add the links if she hasn't already. Yeah, thank you, Allison. So register there, learn more on Maddie's Pet Forum, and hope to see you there. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim.
I'll jump in and I want to echo the thank you to Kim as someone who is pretty much a lifelong renter and has struggled finding housing. This is just such an important topic. So thank you so much for putting this on. I'm Dr. Sheila Segerson. I'm the Director of Shelter Solutions at Maddie's Fund. And just wanted to ask you all to join us for Maddie's Insights next week on Thursday, November 14th at noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll be hearing from Dr. Jacqueline Ellis, who's the Director of Behavior at Toronto Humane Society. She'll be sharing her research about monitoring well-being of cats in animal shelters. So hope to see some of you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sagerson. I know there's at least one more person that wants to make an announcement.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stephen Knight, and I'm the Executive Director at Dogs Matter, where we temporarily foster dogs for people to go into drug and alcohol rehab. And with my work with Dogs Matter, I've been recently nominated as a CNN Hero of the Year. So I'm in the top 5, which means that we already won $10,000, and I have the ability to win $100,000, but I need your help and I need your vote. So I'm asking that everybody vote. I'm going to put the link in the chat, and you can check out the story, and you can please vote. You can vote up until December 3rd, every day, 10 times a day. It's a campaign everybody can get behind. So I appreciate everybody's help, and we're very excited about where this is going to take us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. That's so exciting. Congratulations again. And for those of you who have more announcements, please feel free to share them in the chat. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it back to Shania, who will kick us off for the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Christina, and thank you everyone that did those national announcements. I'm so excited. You have my vote, so I will try to get as many votes as I can, up to that 10 per day. So I'm very excited to announce these speakers that we have today. We heard your voices that said, we want to hear more about grants. So we reached out to two amazing people at two amazing organizations. So we have joining our call today, Elizabeth Gamboa, or Liz Gamboa for short, from PetSmart Charities. And we also have Jory Jolivet from Austin Pets Alive. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to you two to go ahead and start your presentation. And if you have any questions, just give us a nudge.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shanye. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's get this going. All right. Can everyone see that? Look okay? Great. Love it. This is going to be a really quick presentation. And when I say that, I mean, I'm going to talk really quickly because there is so much information about grants. We are going to try to have some time for Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, do put them in the chat. But if we don't get to them, we will do that in the forum after this. And we'll also post the slides in the forum. And I have some additional resources in these slides at the end that you will all have access to. So if you don't manage to take the notes that you want to have, the recording will be available and this will all be available afterwards. And you can ask questions in the forum. So let me get started. So want to give a really brief overview of kind of where this is aimed and what grants are like. If you haven't submitted any grants or if you've done a couple but you aren't doing it regularly, I want to give you an idea of context of kind of where we're at for grants. So how much can you raise with grant writing? Can be a wide range. A grant can be $500 or it can be over $1 million. To give a context, at Austin Pets Alive, we're an organization with a budget of about 15 million. We're a really high capacity shelter / foster based rescue. So we rescue about 10 to 12,000 animals a year. Of our budget this year, so we'll have about 500,000 in grants and then plus another couple million in really large grants. So the 500 is more of the regular grant writing cadence. And then we have a couple big ones. How much time does an individual grant take? Can be anywhere from a couple hours to a couple days. So keep that in mind that an easier grant proposal, you might be able to knock out just in an afternoon. But I would say on average, you're going to want to set aside maybe 8 hours for a grant. And for the context, I am a full-time grant writer. This is all I do at Austin Pets Alive. If you don't get an award, that is part of the process. I think sometimes people get really discouraged when they don't get an award and then they are like, I'm not going to do grants anymore. It's just not working out. You're not going to get maybe half of what you apply for, maybe more, maybe less, but you should be aware of that as just part of the process, and don't get discouraged if you don't get an award. If the funder is open to it, you can always reach out to get feedback about the grant that you wrote, and that's a really good way to learn and have more successes in the future. And then finally, our grants for you, I say yes. If you are a nonprofit organization, definitely yes. If you are not a nonprofit yet, but you might have a fiscal sponsor, fewer grant opportunities are going to be available to you, but some of them will. So definitely look into them. And if you're a government organization, then that is something that I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of experience in terms of being a government organization seeking grants. Some grants are available to you, but the most of them are for nonprofits. So that is the perspective that I'm bringing to this presentation today, just for all of your context. And all of the animals in these photos are from Austin Pets Alive. This is Blueberry Pie. I'm obsessed with her. So these are kind of the 5 key things we're going to go over today. Grant readiness, identifying grants, so grant research and figuring out what you're going to apply for, writing the grants, tracking and reporting once you've received the grants, and then resources, which mostly are going to be provided in the forum. We're not going to go over them very much today. And then Liz is going to kind of pop in between these sections to give you the funder's perspective. So quickly talking about grant readiness, you need all of your nonprofit documentation. So your 501c3, your bylaws and articles of incorporation, all of those things. Or if you are fiscally sponsored, you need that data for the 501c3 that is fiscally sponsoring you. So you're going to want to make sure that that relationship is tight and you understand what you need. You're also going to need your financial data, so your 990s, your most recent balance sheet, income statement, reviewed financials or audit from the previous year, your current year operating budget, and if you're at this time, if you have a calendar year fiscal year, you're going to have next year's operating budget on hand as well, once you get close to the end of the year like we are now. And then you'll want your year-to-date budget to actuals and really just all of the financial data that anyone might possibly want from you. I highly recommend that you should be using an accounting software like QuickBooks or QuickBooks Online that can produce these reports for you if you are, if your budget is more than $50,000 a year, you should probably have an accounting software on deck. You're also going to need to have your program data. So you should have some sort of shelter database like Shelter Love or Shelter Manager or Shelter Buddy. If you have more than 50 animals per year, you shouldn't be putting that just in a spreadsheet. And that program data should have information about your intakes, adoptions, outcomes, your live release rate, and be able to separate by species if you serve both dogs and cats or other species as well. Then you're going to want to be able to report on donation or grant data. So if you have some sort of CRM, so some examples would be Bloomerang, Virtuous, Little Green Light. Some of those are free, some of those are more expensive, but highly recommend getting one if you don't have one, because then it's easy to produce lists of your major funders, which include donors and grantors. But just a caveat with this, don't give out private donor data. If a funder or really anyone asks you for contact information for your donors, that's not really appropriate to share. Names can be shared unless the donor is asked to be anonymous, but just make sure that you are keeping your donor data private as they would like it to be. Then a final thing for grant readiness, you should have an online presence. So you should definitely have a website. And if you have adoptable animals, they should be listed and easy to navigate on your website. Really, it's great to have at least one active social media account, and your profiles on Candid/GuideStar, they're the same thing. And Charity Navigator should be up to date. Funders do look at those. And if you don't know what those are, highly recommend looking into them. You should have photos and videos of your program, like the photos that I'm showing today. These are all APA animals. So you should have photos of those, as well as photos of you doing the work that you do with the animals or with people if you also do work with people. And then if you happen to have an annual report, that kind of combines all of these things. It has your financials, it has photos, it has stories, it has data. That's a great thing that you will be able to attach to a lot of grant proposals, not all of them, but it's an awesome, awesome thing to have. And I highly recommend looking into making one if you don't already do that. It can be 4 pages long. It doesn't have to be a huge novel. I feel like the days of really, really long annual reports are behind us, which is good. So they're much more digestible and easy to make on your side. So I'm going to throw it over to Liz here.
Yeah, so Liz, our question is, from a funder's perspective, what are the most important components when assessing a nonprofit's grant readiness?
Thank you. So I want to highlight 2 of the points or the components that Jory kind of just mentioned. And so I think that your financials and your program data are really important to funders. Essentially, we're looking at that information to try and assess if your organization has the capacity to deliver on grant goals. So funders are definitely going to be looking at your financials. We want to see kind of the financial health of your organization. Same with your program data. We want to peek in there, see what your intakes might be, adoption numbers, because funders want to see the impact that they could have through your organization's programming. So when we look at these items, your financials and your program data, we really are trying to ensure that your organization has the infrastructure, the team, the systems necessary to be able to deliver on the goals of the grant.
Thank you. Pass it back to Jory.
Liz. Okay, now talking about identifying grants, finding the grants to apply for. Yeah, I don't remember this dog's name, but we have a lot of cute Halloween photos that I've added. There are three main types of funders. You've got foundations, which are community foundations or family foundations. So those are privately owned organizations. You have government, so that might be county, city, state, or federal. And then corporate funders. So PetSmart Charities, for example, is a corporate funder. It is the foundation arm of PetSmart, the store that we all know and love. These different types of funders, for the most part, the process is going to be very similar, with the exception of particularly federal grants are very, very complex and long. And honestly, I will say I haven't seen a lot of federal grant opportunities for animal welfare organizations. So if you see some, let us know in the forum, because I would love to know about it, but they are complex. So if you are going to get into them, it's a good idea to have someone around who has done them before. So you might want to contract that out, or at least consult with someone who has gone through that whole process, because it is complicated. Then once you've identified a funder or a grant opportunity, you want to check your eligibility for that. So you'll want to check your program mission fit. If, for instance, the Pedigree Foundation, they only fund work with dogs. So if you're a cat rescue, you're not eligible for Pedigree for the most part. I think there might be some, I don't remember quite. Then you're going to want to check your budget size as well. Some funders or some opportunities are only for larger organizations, and some are only for smaller organizations. So when we look at the resources at the end of this, I have some identified that are for smaller organizations specifically. So you want to check that. And then location, as I mentioned with the government, a lot of things are location bound. So either to your city or your region or your state. So unfortunately, there might be a great fit for you programmatically in New York, but if you're not in New York, they might not want to fund wherever you are. To these, doing your research, obviously funder websites are a great place to get information about grant opportunities and information about that funder and their priorities. So their mission, they'll have a lot of information about what they're looking to fund on their website. Not all funders have websites though, but all funders do have 990s. Which you can find either on ProPublica or grantmakers.io is another source that I really like. Foundation Directory and GrantStation also have access to 990s. They are required to be public by the IRS. And there is a section in there that lists all of the funding that funder has provided in the year that the 990 is for. So that's a really great place to check to see what types of organizations they provide funding to and how much funding they tend to provide. So if you're like, well, I really want a $500,000 grant, and then you look at the 990 and you're like, this funder really only funds like $5,000 to $10,000 grants. It's a good idea to know what you can appropriately ask for from a given funder. Those 990s also have contact information. So usually they'll have a phone number and an address for a funder. So if you don't have a connection with that funder, that phone number is a great way to start to see, especially if you don't know how to apply. And then that kind of goes into our next point around relationship. If you don't have a relationship with a funder, find that phone number or an email and reach out and try to get a meeting to discuss your program with a program officer to assess the fit. So if you're like, I want to start a neonatal kitten nursery, the website doesn't say specifically that that's what they're looking to fund, but I think that it would be a good fit for them. If you can connect with someone, that's a great approach. Even if you think it's a surefire fit, it's great to connect with somebody. Not all foundations will want to have that relationship, and you'll just find that out as you go. But it's great to make the connection if you can. And I'll hand it over to Liz again.
So Liz, can you provide insights into how organizations can reach out to grantors and what methods are the most effective in finding grants?
So definitely, I would say that in my experience as a funder, the organizations that have stood out have been the ones that have been proactive about reaching out. And again, what Jory said is like every organization has their own model for how they want to engage with grantees. But I would say probably your best bet is to get in front of somebody and start building that relationship. If you guys can take one piece of advice from this conversation would be like get in funders' faces, because the only way that they're going to really learn about your work, your commitment, and your mission is through that conversation. Unfortunately, it doesn't, not to say that having an amazing grant writer isn't important, but really it's that relationship piece that's going to take you over the top. So I would say, yeah, start looking at folks' websites. If they don't have a specific manager or grant officer listed on there, email their inbox. And also LinkedIn is a really good resource. Start looking up the organization's name, Maddie's Fund. Is there anybody on there with like a grant officer title, maybe like messaging them? So getting creative with how you're looking for these folks if that information isn't in the website. And kind of like going back to like the opportunities for grants, there are not so many out there. Like grants aren't just like growing on trees. So if you do know of an organization that provides grants, kind of like staying engaged with them. Many funders, especially like national ones, are going to announce their opportunities. So just staying connected with them and like building that relationship, I think is key. If you've already found a funder, you just have to build that relationship. Hope that helps.
Thank you. I'll pass it back to Jory.
That's great advice, and LinkedIn is such a good idea. Now you found a grant, you're like, we're a fit. Here's what writing it is. There's three main types of grant proposals: program support, project support, or general operating support. General operating support is essentially unrestricted, although it usually will be time bound. And program and project are similar. Program support is, like I said, if you have a neonatal kitten nursery, that's a program that you run every year. The funding from that grant will be restricted to that program, to neonatals. And then project is usually a little bit, it's more of a one-time thing. So if you're like, I want to get a transport van, that's a project grant. So those are much more specific. General operating support is going to look at your whole mission, all of your programs, everything like that. Then we have LOIs, which are letter of intent or letter of interest, and proposals. Typically, if there's an LOI, that means that there's another step in the grant proposal process. If it starts with a proposal, you just submit that proposal. That's going to be the whole thing. And then, yeah, so LOIs often are a little less complex than a full proposal. That is kind of the goal, is that a funder is going to get the LOIs, evaluate those, and then invite a subset of the people who submitted LOIs to submit full proposals. But sometimes LOIs can be quite complicated as well. So don't underestimate how long an LOI is going to take, because sometimes it will take a while. Then there's the more formal, which is more of what I've been talking about, versus a more informal proposal approach. Formal is where the funder provides a set of questions. There are character limits or word limits on those questions, and you answer each question. They ask specifically for the attachments that they want. And then some smaller family foundations are more likely to have an informal process where really they just want you to send them a letter that describes what you want funding for, and they might not even ask for specific attachments, or they might say, please send a board list. So just be aware that sometimes you're going to have a grant portal that you have to sign into, and it's very formal in that way, versus the more just send a letter or reach out and have a conversation with someone. Timelines and deadlines, very important to keep in mind. Grant decisions typically are going to come 3 to 6 months after application, sometimes longer than that. So if you have a need for tomorrow, grants are not the way to fund it. You should be thinking ahead about, what do I want to do next year? Because for most grants, the grant period is about a year. So if I'm submitting today and I'm not going to hear back for 6 months, I need to be thinking about the project that I'm doing 6 months to 18 months from now. So definitely keep that in mind. And then deadlines are serious. Most of the time you can't submit late. as Liz and I were saying, if you have a really good relationship with a funder, they've funded you many years in a row, you have something going on and you just can't get it in the day that it's due, you get it in the next day. Sometimes that can be okay, but you need to communicate about that. So keep those deadlines in mind. I always try to submit about a week before anything is due, just in case something comes up. If I get sick, if the portal is down, if we have an internet outage, anything like that, plan ahead. Don't miss those deadlines. Some of these might sound silly, but when you're writing a grant, answer the questions that they ask. If they ask specific questions, don't talk about what you want to talk about. Talk about what they've asked you. So if you're finding that you don't want to answer the questions, if you're trying to communicate something else, it might not be the right fit for this program. Then be specific, use data. So if you have had a program, looking at this kitten, he's one of our neonatal kittens. If you have a neonatal kitten program, if you've been around for 5 years, you should have data that reflects on those 5 years, and you should be able to talk about the patterns that you see in that data, what your goals are for the grant period and things like that. And then be realistic. Don't lie. Don't set goals that you know that you're not going to meet. Don't, yeah, just be realistic about it, and don't try to embellish things because you think it will look better. We want to be very realistic and very honest about what's going on. And that's actually, I'm going to skip one. That's connected to don't chase grants. So what I mean by that is if you will go back to Pedigree, mostly has programs for dogs. If you're a cat sanctuary and you're like, oh, I really want that grant from Pedigree because $10,000 sounds really nice. Don't start a dog program just to go after that grant. You should be seeking grants and applying for grants that will support things that you already are doing or want to do. So you want to be guided by your mission, not by the grants that are available. And going back up to the previous point, you'll want to write your grants in a separate document. I'm a big fan of Google, so I write all my grants in Google Docs. You could use Microsoft Word, but most of them you're going to submit in a portal, and those portals are a little unreliable. You might lose your work. It's much easier to write in a separate document and then cut and paste into those portals. So definitely do that if you have not done that in the past. And then this last thing here, creating a boilerplate document or a case for support. This is just one place where you can go where all of these things that are included in a typical grant are written down already. So you are ideally, except for your first grant, you are not starting from scratch. You're using language that's on your website, that's on your social media, that's in your e-newsletters, and then other grants. So you're pulling together the language to answer those things. And sometimes you might get a question in a grant that you've never written about before, and that's fine. But have a document or a place where you keep all the writing that you are using for grants, so that it's easy for you to reference back to it. And that actually dovetails nicely with this one. This kitten is garlic bread, and I love him so much. So these are kind of the broad things that are typically going to be included in a grant proposal. You're going to want your history, the history of your organization, and the mission and vision of your organization. Almost all grants start with that, just the basics. You'll want a summary of your programs. If you just have one program, that's great. If you have multiple programs, be able to describe all of them in a short amount of space. And then if this is a program or a project grant, you want that specific request. What is the program? What is the project? Why is it needed? What is the need that it's addressing? Then you're going to want to talk about, for your program or your project, the outputs and the outcomes. Outputs are what you do, and then outcomes are what happens because of what you've done. Then you want to have historical data for your program or your organization. We mentioned that already. Then it's really great to have some stories too, like being able to look at this kitten and be like, this is garlic bread. I know he's been adopted. Being able to talk about where he came from. He was a neonate. And, have some of those personal stories that connect to feelings, because grants are this balance of data and like the specifics of things, as well as the emotional connection to the work that we do. Then there's kind of other things that grantors will ask for: DEI information, other policies, maybe like your euthanasia policy, etc. You should have that language on hand. they will often ask you for other sources of funding. So, you know, I might have 5 funders that are contributing to one project because the budget for that project is that large. They want to know who else is kind of on board. And then attachments, there will always be attachments, your financials, your board info, your policies, the annual report photos will come in as attachments. Handing it over to Liz for this.
Okay, so when reviewing, what key components make a proposal particularly strong? Do you want to answer that one first, and then we'll jump into the second?
Yes. So, okay, this is a good one. I think that funders are typically going to prioritize proposals that align with their mission and their goals. So that's kind of like, I hope it's a no-brainer, but typically like that's who they're gonna prioritize. And so for those strong proposals, typically would outline a project that's going to directly support the funder's objectives. And also it's going to provide like a measurable outcome that the project aims to achieve. So typically when we're looking at strong proposals, they're going to hit on those 2 pieces. Yeah, so I can stop there and we can go to the next one if you want.
Yes, so then what are some common pitfalls of weaker proposals?
And so for the weaker proposals, what happens is typically there's an emphasis on the organization's like own internal challenges and funding gaps. And then there's no clear link to the funder's mission. So typically in those like weaker proposals, it's more of like, hey, I need funding for this. You know, we don't have, you know, funding for X, Y, and Z, and the proposal ends there. There's no connection to, oh, and we want to increase adoptions, or, oh, we want to increase services in a specific, you know, whatever the proposal is, it stops at your like shortcomings. And so I think that funders are more likely to engage with proposals that kind of help us connect the dots between like your organization's needs and the needs of the funder, like the objectives of what the funder wants to get done with that grant. And my suggestion is if you do want to strengthen your proposal, always reach out to the funder and ask about like what they're looking to track, like what are the important outcomes or metrics for them for this grant, and kind of start that conversation so that you can ensure to highlight those important metrics in your proposal.
I am learning so much from both of you, so I will pass it back over to Jory.
That's great. Yes. Cool. Ooh. We have gone somewhere else really quick. We're going to come back to where we were. Okay, tracking and reporting. You're going to track everything. I hope that you or your grant writer is very, because they are going to need to be. So you're going to want to track the research that you've done, the proposals that you've submitted, the reports that you have scheduled. You're going to track data for your funded program. So if it's a neonatal nursery, you're going to track how many kittens came in, what your survival rate is, all of those things. I am in the forum, we'll have a tracking template for you. So this is a grants tracking template. So you'll be able to put together essentially a calendar of the proposals that you have looking forward. And then login information for those portals. All of that should be very easy for you to find. I like having it in one very large central spreadsheet. So you will get that tracking template. And then also, once you have received grants, you're going to keep those proposals on file, those contracts, those reports. So make sure that you have some sort of filing system for all of these things. For reports, you will either have an interim and final report or just a final report. Some grants you don't need to submit reports for, but I recommend if you got a grant, submitting a report, even if you weren't required to, just to let the funder know, this is how we use your money. Here's a cute dog, a cute cat that we saved because of your support. This dog is Oatmeal. She was recently crowned the mayor of Boston as of last week. So she has a lot of responsibility on her shoulders. And then in your grant agreements, once you've been awarded a grant, there may be marketing requirements. So you might need to make social media posts thanking the funder or talking about the work that you've done with the funder support. You might need to put out a press release, other recognition like putting their logo and a link to their website on your website. You might need to attend certain meetings or webinars to that all of the grantees are going to need to attend. So make sure that you are reading those grant agreements and that you understand what's going to be required of you. And then going back to relationships, if you have big changes in your program, if you apply to support a position and then the person in that position leaves, you should tell your funder, even if it's not time for your report, it's great to be in communication. And then, if you think about in 2020 or late 2019, certainly I had the experience where we had received funding from funders for programs that were not possible. So you get in touch and there might be opportunities where you can switch where the funding is going in your organization, or just really collaborate with the funder. You should really see them as a partner in your work. And then another good thing to follow up is inquire about reapplication. Some funders require you to take a year off between funding. Some don't. There's lots of different guidelines for reapplication, but if you're getting to the end of your grant period, it's a great time to reach out, say, hey, we'd love to apply again. It's another good time to be like, this is the program we're thinking about. And I saw someone mention, what should you do if you don't get a grant? It's another good time to reach out and say, hey, could we get any feedback on the proposal? Is there something that we could do differently? We'd love to apply again next time. So passing it back to Liz.
Okay, Liz, what are your expectations around communication from grantees if challenges arise during the grant period?
Thank you. And I think this is such an important question, because this is really a partnership between the funder and the grantee. So I think that if you are ever experiencing any challenges, reach out to your grantor to your funder to discuss these challenges. Especially for me and my organization, we want to be actively engaged with the groups that we support. So we are always welcoming open communication, and building a relationship helps in these types of instances where, if you're having a challenge, you're able to kind of make your case or explain to your funder, like, hey, these are the challenges that we're facing. And so there's the opportunity for your funder to be able to help you out, whether it's by exploring potential resources or solutions that are that are giving you barriers to reaching your goals. Grant managers have access to additional resources and expertise. So by kind of reaching out ahead of time, letting your funder know that you're having an issue, it gives you an opportunity to partner and keep up that communication so that you guys can kind of reach your goal together.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Jory.
Lovely. We are getting to the end, so we will talk about some of the resources. We're going to make these available to you. This first thing is a list of grant roundups, which is basically lists of grant opportunities. And these are all animal welfare grants. So hopefully you don't have grant opportunities that you're planning to apply for, this will give you some. So I'm hoping that this is a really useful resource for you. Then I have linked some resources for research. So if you want to learn more about the funders, this is a great place to do that. Foundation Directory is kind of the gold standard of grant research, but it is also quite expensive. So honestly, most organizations don't have a membership with Foundation Directory, but you can often get access through your public library, or a local university is another good place to check. So definitely check with your library, see if you can get access to Foundation Directory. You usually will have to access it at the library itself, but definitely check it out. And then Candid and GuideStar are the same thing. They send out regular emails with RFPs, which are requests for proposals. So funders will let Candid know that they have a grant opportunity. And then those emails are a great way just to be alerted of those opportunities. And then here are those grants for small orgs that I mentioned. So these are all either by volume or budget size, or I think one of them is for new organizations, so organizations that have been around for 5 years or less. And then disaster relief grants are an interesting exception to many of the rules we've talked about today. A lot of these are available on a much shorter timeline. So rather than waiting 3 to 6 months, you might get a response back within a couple of weeks or a month. because we all know natural disasters wait for no one. But these are really good ones, especially for folks in Florida right now. Oh, Lush discontinued their charity pets. Oh, well, look at that. It looked like they still had them, but I'm too big, so I can't apply. So I haven't gotten all the details. But yes, if you have experienced a natural disaster, these are some of the good grants available to you. And then there are opportunities for further learning on Maddie's Academy. Here are some of the grant-specific courses and then some general fundraising courses as well. These dogs here, the one on top, his name is Terry Snooze, and then the one on the bottom is Randall, and he's one of my favorite dogs that I've met at APA because he's such a beautiful little mutt and he looks like a gremlin, and I just loved him so much. He has since been adopted. And of course, Terry Snooze is the most handsome man in the universe. So that is it for now. So I know we're kind of right at time, but team, are there any Q&A questions that we missed?
Yeah, so it looks like you did answer a lot of them in the chat. But for those that may not have been able to access the chat due to screen challenges, I wanted to know if we could touch back on them. So can you explain what CRM is, what it stands for, and maybe give some examples of some CRMs in the animal welfare space?
Yes. I think it's customer relationship management. Is that right? Okay. I'm like, it's just a CRM in my head. A CRM is a software or a portal that is a database, essentially, particularly of funder info or donor information is really a good place for CRMs to be used. So if you have an interface on your website that accepts donations, ideally that's connected to your CRM, so that information is going in, so you can look up information about a specific donor. I did list some on the slide, so those will be on the forum, but I believe that Little Green Light is one of the free ones. There are so many. There's Neon, there's Little Green Light, there's Bloomerang, Kindful, Virtuous is what we use at APA. There are pluses and minuses to Virtuous. It is on the more expensive end, but not the most expensive. Salesforce, Razor's Edge, these are all CRMs. And they're not specific to animal welfare, and they actually don't have to be. What you do want specific to animal welfare is your animal database, and that you may have an animal database that includes information about fosters and things like that. So it has people information in it as well. There is an overlap for a CRM. You might have volunteer information, you might have foster information, or you might keep that in your animal database. I don't know of any that combines those two functions, but that would be a really cool thing if anyone is a techie and wants to start that business.
Thank you for explaining that. That helped me a lot. So hopefully our attendees felt it was helpful as well. You mentioned when someone asked, do you recommend to share annual reports on the website? You mentioned yes. Can either of you explain what are some benefits to having that information readily available?
I'll say from our perspective, it's great for funders are probably going to look at your website. Especially if they haven't funded you before, they don't know a lot about your organization. They're going to want to see how you present yourself publicly, but also donors. Really anyone who might go to your website is going to check that out. And it's really nice, especially if you have some donor who's just looking around, they've got some money they want to give somewhere, but they don't know where yet. An annual report is a great document for them to be able to easily find to understand the impact of your organization.
Thank you. And I'm going to pass it off to Christina.
Thank you. I just have one question in the chat. And they asked, what happens if your organization is new and you don't have 990 forms?
That's a very good question. And Liz might have some information about that as well. You may not be eligible for grants in your first year. So that's something to just keep in mind. You are eligible for donations, individual donations. Those are as soon as you get your 501c3, those are tax deductible. So definitely do that fundraising on that side of things. But there are probably a lot of foundations that you won't be eligible for their funding opportunities. And there may be some, very few but some grant opportunities that are specifically for new organizations. So Google's your best friend. Definitely look into that and see if you can find any. And a lot of those are also going to be local to you. So look in terms of if you're in, Alameda County, just be like Alameda County grants for new nonprofits, things like that. But yeah, a lot of opportunities are going to want to be able to see that you have a history of success as a nonprofit.
Okay, I think we have maybe time for one more quick question. Someone asked, is it a good idea to join up for a grant with another nonprofit, say Senior Fosters for Cats?
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes there are grant opportunities that really, really want to see you collaborate with other organizations. Sometimes, you want to be clear about who's going to be receiving the money and spending the money and how it's going to be spent. Austin Pets Alive, we've worked with a lot of other nonprofits just through the course of our work. And we may mention them as partners in our grant proposals, but we're not going to necessarily work on those grant proposals with those partners and share those funds, although they may be beneficiaries of the funding. So I hope that answers the question. It is a little complex, but there are grant opportunities that basically are looking for you to have a specific agreement with another nonprofit. An example is Red Rover does really amazing grants that are around care for animals of people escaping domestic violence. And you need to have a codified MOU with a shelter, a domestic violence shelter, in order to be eligible for those grants. So it depends on the opportunity, and that's going to be the answer to a lot of these questions. Every grant opportunity, every RFP is going to be a little bit different. So make sure that you are getting the specifics of those and reading all of the fine print is usually not too fine. You don't have to go searching for it, but make sure that you read everything that funders post about it.
Thank you, Jory. Thank you, Liz. This has been an absolutely amazing presentation, and it looks like there's a lot of questions that we still may be able to get to in the forum, so definitely hop over there if we did not get to your question today. As a reminder, we will not be having a call next week, November 11th, so that we are able to honor our veterans. We will resume our calls on the 18th, the following week, with another great talk. Thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you all over on the forum.